Record. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Compliancy Guys. Today, we're going to be talking about this new executive order that came out from the White House last night on improving the nation's cybersecurity. We are recording this call. We are simulcast on Clubhouse. There are 3 or 4 people on Clubhouse right now. For those of you that are on Clubhouse and want to join the Zoom session, you can go to thecompliancyguys.com/clubhouse and get the link. Other than that, you guys can sit there and listen while the rest of us all sit here on Zoom. So I'm Trevor. I'm going to go ahead and make you co-host, and you can
manage the humans.
Manage the humans. Where is Trevor? Here is Trevor. Make co-host. Yes. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here, and let me know if you can see the executive order up on my screen. Yay, nay? Perfect. I get a couple thumbs up.
Yep.
Good stuff there. All right. So while I'm yapping, you guys can all mute yourself to kind of limit the background noise. Little housekeeping, that would be great. So as you know, generally every week here on the Compliancy Guys, we tend to either bring in a subject matter expert. We tend to talk about tools or technologies or frameworks or control sets and all the things surrounding GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. And generally this is for our paid members, but I thought that, you know, this executive order is kind of a big deal. And I figured I'd open it up to a bunch more people to kind of have an open conversation around starting to interpret what this thing means, right? So I kind of did some preliminary, the passcode on mobile. I'm going to put that in chat, hopefully. So there's all the stuff in chat for those that need it. Trevor, if you have it, it's in chat too. If people are asking for the link, don't use the Skype for Business link. All right, sorry, where was I? So I thought I would open this up to the general public because I think this is, you know, going to have a really huge impact on not only the small businesses, but MSPs at large. And so the initial discovery that I started doing when I was reading through this morning was quite interesting. The first thing that I noticed was that the term service provider or managed service provider or service provided organization was mentioned 15 times in this document. And if I were to interpret that, that would sort of lead me to believe MSPs, MSSPs, us, you know, people like us doing this work for our clients. Those clients might be federal government contractors, you know, somewhere on the defense supply chain, you know, somewhere along the lines, us doing work for them. So that's really interesting to me because we've not really seen a lot, especially in the CMMC world, about guidance and directive, and it's certainly not at an executive level about managed service providers. So, you know, you've all heard me say this before, legislation is coming. Well, I think this is probably part of the foundation on which it's going to be built upon. Now there's an EO, you know, that has to run through its paces and whatnot. And obviously it'll take a little while for these varying legislations and stuff and law to come into play. But I mean, I think for me anyways, the writing is on the wall. Does anybody have any thoughts about the whole idea of interpreting the managed services aspect? No one? No.
So my input, I guess, is that I think it really had to do with government contractors. So anybody servicing out some government contractors. Yeah. So any service, like anybody doing NIST or CMC, right?
Well, that is, I mean, as I'm digging through it, I mean, it does not
including cloud services. So right.
It does not say anywhere in here about CMMC.
I know, but it says Federal Information Systems,
which is another interesting tidbit. It
Yeah.
does talk a lot about FedRAMP, and it does talk a lot about NIST, but it doesn't explicitly reference 171 or 853 or any of the other SPs that have come out from NIST. But
so
it
maybe
does.
this is going to be blanket across all government agencies instead of just DoD, right? This is going to
That's how
like OPM type level.
That's how I'm interpreting this, and how I can actually relate this to actual contract work. Let me see if I can find the link while we're talking here. So I have a federal government contract. They do online data collection for school and for an award program. They published a document in September of 2020 saying that let me just go find that that the any contractor doing business with the federal government in the Department of Education will be subject to FedRAMP ATO stuff. I'm literally going through this conversation right now with Duluth, Coal-Fire, and a couple of others about looking at FedRAMP ATO and what that means. But the interesting part of the contract language, there's one sentence, and I wish I could find it, that explicitly says unfederated access to any managed service providing tools, technologies, and frameworks and things that any quote unquote MSP is doing.
Wow.
Yeah, unfederated access, which is like scary if you think about it. Where the hell is
so that almost kind of implies you have to run a separate set of tools just for your federal work almost.
Yeah, well, you know,
for each one.
They've really been pushing FedRAMP, which, you know, for what I've been learning and dealing with about FedRAMP is that excuse me, that hold on, I want to find this document so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, there it is. All right, so this document's got a bunch of my notes in it because I was hacking it up for internal use, but that's fine. So can you guys see the PDF that I'm sharing? For those on Clubhouse that can't share the PDF, I'll go ahead and put on the website a link for you to see exactly what I'm talking about in this federal requirement for the Department of Education, right? Now, we know CMMC, DIB, supply chain, defense, blah, 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 blah. We know that's all for that, but this is actually specific to the Department of Ed. And when we're looking at the executive order that came out, it doesn't say it's specific to a certain department or executive branch in the government. It says the government as a whole. But what I want to show you here is SERVIS service, if I can type, PRO, service provider. So blah, 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 FedRAMP ATO, all my cool notes. Maybe I missed it. Yada, yada, yada. So this is all Department of Ed, but it talks about FedRAMP compliant, ATO from FedRAMP, ATO from FedRAMP. I thought there was a section in here that talked about MSSPs. MSP. Managed. Apparently not. Can't find it. All right, that's here another. My bad. I should have been better prepared, but I was a little busy in my previous meeting. Oh, there we go. Page. So right here, it talks about so let me take the 10,000 foot step back. We are talking about the executive order. The question was brought up on whether or not it's specifically geared towards DoD. And what I'm saying is, I don't think it does. And I have an example of that because this document that I'm showing on my screen that came out from the Department of Education talks about FedRAMP, talks about managed security services providers, MSSPs or MSPs for that
Yeah, but
matter.
it says for any of the department's third-party managed security service providers. So
Yeah.
the word department in there, that implies it's not the contractors, it's actually the federal departments.
No.
For an active
So let me clarify that, right? So my company.
those retained or hired by OIG or for those.
Yeah. Let me clarify, because this is like daily practice for me in this project with this contract, right? I provide services to an educational company. That educational company is contracted with the federal government. So I'm contracted in this case with RMC. RMC so I have an agreement in place with RMC as their MSSP, managing all of their security, up, down, back, forth, everything, right? I have what RMC then has a contract with the federal government, the Department of Education. The Department of Education is pushing this stuff downstream to any of the department third-party managed service providers. So I'm providing a service. So it's 3 steps removed, but they're still wanting all that access. And I know this because every week I get from the ISSO, Steve at the Department of Education, and Marcello, our program officer, every week, POAMs, policy enhancements, vulnerability pieces, all the things within 853 that I have to adhere to for this client, all that stuff gets pushed down to me every week. There was a new Chrome vulnerability that came out 2 days ago. OCIO in the department sends out a letter to all the contractors and all their subs saying, is this vulnerability part of your network, and report back. So I read this as, if I'm doing work with a client and that client has federal government work, regardless of DOD or whatever department, they're going to want unfederated access to all of that stuff, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but the Department of Education can't mandate something for DOD. So just the basic wording of the department.
Right.
It's
so
contained within that organization, right?
It is contained within that organization, right? So DOD has CMMC and DFARS and the FAR and 171 and all that stuff. But when we go back to this executive order, and it talks about service providers all over the place. It doesn't necessarily say, what am I trying to get at? This
say it's Department of Education.
This is government wide. This is not defense. This is not ed. It is not specific to a specific executive branch or anything within the federal government. Other than the bodies that are putting together the information, it doesn't say who it applies to yet. I think
it's a generic blanket, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I want to make the delineation of. This is going to apply to everything. And I think eventually down the road, it's going to apply to small businesses. There's a lot of talk in here about, who the authority is, CISA, FBI, IC, blah, blah, blah.
We'll figure it out.
There's a whole boatload of people involved in trying to get this stuff figured out. But within 90 days is said a lot. The FAR Council needs to come up with stuff within 90 days. The NSA needs to come up with stuff. The Attorney General within 90 days. Basically, this looks like they're going to start rolling out all of this stuff nowish. That might, I don't know, maybe it will push CMMC and DIBCAC and the rest of the guys over there to get their act together, because we know they've been dragging their feet. So all right, I've chatted a lot. You're effectively a business associate. Yeah, so Alan just said we're effectively a business associate, a BA, right? So yes, in the sense of what I'm doing with the company I'm working for and their agreement, it's a BA essentially. So yeah, that was a good point. Thanks for that. Let's peek over here on Clubhouse. Bunch of people on Clubhouse. Thanks for joining us. Unfortunately, I do have Zoom going as well, so you can't see my screen, but what I'm sharing is the executive order that came out from the White House yesterday about cybersecurity. If you want to get the link, you can go to thecompliancyguys.com/clubhouse, and you can join via Zoom there, and be able to get to see what we're sharing on our screen. Wow. I talk too fast sometimes. So has anybody started digging through this? Because I don't want to be the only guy talking here, because I've come up with some interesting points, but I don't want to be the only guy talking here.
I read a little bit of it, Tim, based on a little bit of your prompting, and then I saw it somewhere else. And anything they're releasing right now, you kind of look at it and you go, let's see what happens. But then I heard more and more and more. My takeaway on this, from the little bit that I have read so far, is I said, okay, somebody's got somebody's ear.
Yep.
Because how often over the last 10, 20 years have they talked security, 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 security? Now all of a sudden it's a presidential order.
Right.
So what happened? Who wrote this? Is there any sightings of who put this together?
Well,
because that's the real question.
Yeah, there's been some scuttlebutt around certain individuals. And again, since I don't have confirmation on exactly who those people are, I'm certainly not going to divulge anything that might be rumor. So I don't want to fill the rumor mill of where, which senator or which person or which cyber expert, or I don't want to, I
think this is staff. Somebody got the staff that thinks they know what they're talking about. But if you read the wording on a lot of this crap, some of it's very specific, like it's been cherry picked from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it sound like it was actually written by somebody that does this.
Yep.
And was like, this shit needs to be done. We're reacting to the pipeline, this and that, and this should be far reaching. And so it's got to be somebody, I'm figuring, that's been pretty front and center, who then managed to, through new political ties, shall we say, have an ear.
Right.
I mean, how often have you seen something this far reaching? I mean, look at this, 60 days, 90 days. I mean, it's very specific.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's somebody in the security industry.
So, there are a lot of specific timelines mentioned. And then there were a lot of specific agencies mentioned. But the actual specificity of what's being asked is sort of vague, in a sense that, well, let's see. These people shall, I'm just pulling this one, shall update their specific requirements. Right? So that's pretty vague. Let me just read the whole sentence.
But it also kind of reads like some of the other CMMC stuff, the 800, 171 stuff. It's like, boy, this sounds really familiar. Let's be really vague. But then all of a sudden you're like, here's like laser accurate stuff thrown in the middle of it. And you're like, what?
Yeah, when you say agencies, that means that this is going to be guidance for them to make decisions.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Zero trust architecture.
Zero trust.
I was like, huh.
Platform as a service, software, infrastructure, software, all the XaaS things, but zero trust. So there are
federal,
there are very specific words in some aspects around.
It's fishy to me. I'm sorry.
It does.
I'm actually reaching out to a policy writer at the White House. He's written policies for the White House, and
nice.
See, maybe he might join us. He's wrote a lot of frameworks for Congress and stuff.
That'd be great. The agency shall provide reports. Okay, what kind of reports? So while it is specific in some areas, it's not specific in others.
So that stuff that's not specific, that's for the agency to figure out that stuff, right?
Yep.
So that's like, hey, no mask required at the CDC level. Now the states need to figure out how they're going to handle that, right?
Exactly. Now,
some stuff is direct. Clear that, like the Homeland Defense and the FBI and stuff, that they have to report the stuff. So
one of the things that I noticed where I saw a shift in some of the mindset here is, when you're looking at NIST 171, when you're looking at CMMC, you know, a lot of it kind of talks about infrastructure. It talks about, you know, device. It talks about sort of, you know, making things run with what's there. What I've seen in this that's kind of a big difference is this whole idea about enhancing software supply chain security. Like, I haven't really seen a lot, and again, you know, I'm not a legal expert or a policy guy, but well, let me rephrase that. I'm not a federal government trying to understand and interpret law and policy person. Policies, yes, when it comes to writing and implementing policies.
So what I believe a lot of this is that you know, we see a lot of the news, and Biden has to do something, so he did this, but this is not going to be tomorrow, because even like within 30 days of the date order, the Secretary of Commerce shall direct NIST to solicit input, blah, 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 right? So that takes time to do that. They have 30 days to send a letter over to NIST, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. So, I mean, this just outlines some timing, correct?
but this is not, this is like, look, I'm Mr. President, I did something, people. If you read a lot of those things, that's what you see is a lot of blah, blah, blah. This is not going to happen soon.
And that's why
it is coming. Yeah.
That's why I kept saying, who wrote this?
Yeah.
There's somebody with an agenda here that wrote this.
I'm reaching out to a guy, he didn't answer me, but it's actually Chase and see.
Didn't they omit also hardware supply chain security in this entirely?
Well, yeah, that's the point I was trying to make, is that it doesn't talk much about hardware or infrastructure. I mean, it did say infrastructure as a service, but there's a whole big section on software supply chain. It talks a lot about building software, how that software is, you know, dealt with, you know, blah, 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 all this stuff, you know, software or code components, controls and internal third-party components, tools, services. Like, I half feel like, somebody found a bug in some really big tool that MSPs and people use and exploited it, and there was a, you know, a software flaw and also a human flaw. Like, you know, when you were saying somebody's got somebody's ear, like,
Yep.
third party software components. Okay. SolarWinds. So, you know, you know,
Well, I mean, if you look back at a couple of years ago with the Kaspersky incident,
yeah,
I mean, shouldn't we have woken up at that point?
absolutely.
And I say we as a whole, government and MSPs, but I mean, I think this has been a long time coming.
Yeah. Establishing multi-factor risk-based authenticity across the enterprise, documenting dependencies across the enterprise, encryption. I saw her here earlier, encrypting data at rest and in transit. So, you know, whoever wrote this had some technical knowledge. It wasn't just, you know, Sally's secretary just throwing crap on a page. Up-to-date provenance, you know, software code components, internal third party, like.
But this is stuff you see on internal government systems too. So a lot of it's cut and paste. But hardware-wise, like in the 80s, particularly the 90s, right? We had to really protect hardware because that's what we had. Everything ran on hardware, you know.
Right.
And actually, the whole supply chain, because the freaking Chinese were sticking funny chips in there, and we as U.S. we did the same thing, right? So now, really, the software is the game now. The hardware is kind of trivial. But most of the threats are not coming from the hardware side, they're coming from the software side. Because everything's a software as a service, pretty much. You can take a Raspberry Pi and run the same program.
Right. So that was just another big interesting takeaway that I kind of got out of this whole thing is, you know, the going after the software aspects of security and code and encryption and data in transit, data at rest, and yeah.
Well, the data is the gold, right? So that's the most critical thing here. So the software access to the data.
Code review tools, you know, software composition tools, penetration testing.
Yes. This is just way too specific.
Yeah. You know, talking about IoT devices, right? That was something that I would like. Oh, great. Now we have the federal government trying to legislate my Alexa.
Yeah. It might not necessarily be bad.
No. I'm just, you know, you think of it that way, like, you know, that goes all the way down to the consumer level.
Yeah.
Right? If you think
But-
The consumer does not have a federal contract or a government entity.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the other thing that we could look at this as the other thing that struck me about this is and especially the things that you're pointing out is using this directive as a tool against your vendors. You know, sometimes when you're trying to find out details about how they're doing things and what's your compliance level, they're not necessarily forthcoming. This may actually force them to have everything right out on their website. You know, we're compliant with, yeah, I mean, what's the one they always lead with, the SOC 2? It's like, oh, that's nice. And then you're like, what about all this other stuff? Oh, we'll have to get back to you on that. And then you never hear anything, you know?
That's the worst stuff to put on your website. You don't want to give the bad guy all this information on what your compliance are, because he can read those and detect exactly kind of.
Well, I mean, if they're just saying they're compliant with this, compliant with that, and now you can go, great, I'd like a copy of your certificate for that so I can present it to my client because we're using this particular tool or this particular backup or whatever. Hey, this is a requirement. You know, I've just found them going down the CMMC route here, trying to do some of my due diligence. Some of them aren't exactly the most forthcoming with information. You know?
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Does this executive order at all open up like a backdoor with, they keep mentioning encryption, you know, in transit and at rest, but also the reporting aspect of things. So ultimately, it looks as if there's like a battle between privacy and security. Like they're going to have to break apart encryption to be able to identify the risk. So does this open up things into the consumer level or non-federal level that now we have to start taking apart proxying encryption and breaking it apart and reporting on it?
I actually have a different take on S. So Internet of Things, if you really look at that, right, informed by existing consumer product labeling programs. So, you know, the Internet of Things has been kind of really not standardized around certain security practices. UL put one forth during the Obama administration, right? And I mean, you know, UL does all the power stuff, but they define the standard and they're the lab you have to use. That's not the organization I'd want, right? But I think that's what that's about.
Right. Well, you have my attention because there's a bottle of Blantons behind your shoulder. So, and if Paul's watching, he'd probably see that too. And if I'm not mistaken, that's also a bottle of Japanese whiskey too.
It is. The one that you should be going for, though, is this white one. This is a birthday present. I turned 59 this year. I was born in 1961. This is actually a bottled in bond Jim Beam that was bottled in 1961.
I was going to say that looks like a bottle and bond from Beam. Nice.
And you know, back in the day, they couldn't move any bourbon, right? So they had to put it in funny decanters. There's like in the 60s and 70s, right? There's like bowling ball pins and other stuff like that, right?
Nice. Well, you had my attention at Blanton, so. What's that, Paul?
And I am seeing it.
Yeah. So, all right, we digress. But hey,
I got a pro. Hopefully he'll come on. He's at another meeting, but if we're here long enough, he'll join us. And he writes policies for the Fed. So
yeah, that would be great. So, establishing a cyber safety review board, which is interesting, right? So, I mean, they talk about a bunch of different directives here, incident coordination. You know, shall, you know, relate activities, blah, 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 blah. Like, I wonder if what they're thinking here is, you know, you've heard me say it before, a cybersecurity czar and some people underneath him to kind of manage all this. Yeah, see, the deputy chair of the board, i.e. the czar of security. You know.
yeah, they're gonna fall under Homeland Security though.
Yeah. Well, the question is really how far are they going to push it down? Will it be every small business? Is it just government related, like it sounds like initially? But I mean, if they're spreading into IoT and stuff like that, now they're saying, okay, you major corporations with Alexas and Google devices, etc., you know, you're responsible for this now.
Yeah, only if they're using federal contracts or government, you know, departments. So if they have them, and most of that is just cut and paste words, because most of those organizations don't allow those things in there, but you will see unclassified systems with IoT on.
Well, I was getting at though is it's it's at that level now. Are they going to push it further down into the, anything in the consumer market? And I mean, how often do you see consumer devices that are just chucked out the door with vulnerabilities? I was reading about Wi-Fi 6 recently. There are new vulnerabilities in that, and most of it's attributed to sloppy coding,
Well, and this is where you have to level stuff, right? So the federal stuff's the highest, and Joe Blow's home network is probably the lowest, because you can't develop the devices and get them as small as people want, security and risk, all the stuff in there, right? So I don't think it's going to come down to, but people need to know when they're buying it that this could be a label on it, that this could cause risk and vulnerabilities.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what I agree with. Now,
this could cause cancer.
Let's take that to the next level. We got COVID going on, whatever, all these people working from home. How many people are contractors now that used to work for these big agencies, right? Now it's pushed down to the home level. Now I'm Mr. Chinese or North Korean agent, just throwing some BS thing out there as an example.
Yeah.
Now I park outside of this guy that I followed home from Lockheed Martin. I have friends that do that. That I have one that works for Lockheed right around the corner from me.
Right.
But I know he's got crappy wireless.
And I hope he's running like Total or some type of SASE and software.
Well, I would imagine if he's working from
but they're
home
not.
on
When
their
they're first
device.
home, they're not.
But the question is, can they get on his wireless network and intercept traffic now? That's what I'm throwing out there. Where is the delineation and the responsibility?
Well, those contractors will have to have, when they work from home, they're going to have to, like the Department of Courts basically do it. They have people, they give people a separate ISP in there, right? But yeah, but it's Blue River, I keep forgetting the name.
Well, you do bring up an interesting point, right? So yes, I'm a contractor. Yes, I work from home. Yes, I do everything I can possibly to protect my network, blah, 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 but, I'd like to think I'm the exception than the rule. And you think about COVID and you think about, the past year when federal government buildings were shut down and people were working, quote unquote, from home. I know, a couple of the projects that I work on and the PMOs or the project directors that are working from home, like they're asking me, like they're federal employees. They're not my people, my whatever. They're asking me about this kind of stuff. Like, hey, is my home Wi-Fi safe for me to work on my work computer? I'm like, you need to talk to the department. Like, that is not my, like.
Yeah, you avoid that question.
And she's like, should I be using my cell phone? And the whole Zoom versus Teams thing that happened in the beginning of the year, blah, blah, blah. Like, it just does pose some interesting tidbits to think about, a remote workforce at home and the protections that are most likely not there, right? Unless, of course, they bought Comcast and got the security package with Comcast, then they're safe.
On the Intel side, a lot of them could not work from home, period. It's not happening, right? And then a lot of people at a lower level, they had basically a virtual desktop they piped into. But there is a lot of code development, even for the classified, that they allow people to write unclassified code and then they send it inside.
Yeah.
But
Rob, I would just mention, you'd brought up earlier in the conversation this private versus public stuff, and I've just been seeing more and more, and I'm forgetting the name of I think there's a director at the National Security Advisors Council or something, where they spoke to Congress. They were brought into Congress to speak to, I think, one of the committees, and he talked about the challenge that our best of the best, our warriors, and those folks that are very much trained to do everything cyber for our armed services and external to the country, how Russian or Chinese can just set up inside the country, and now they can't use the best of the best to even monitor those people, right? And I think a lot of the tone that I'm seeing in this public-private part is really to address that. It may be the shelling of the beach where they're going to try to allow, inside the border foreign federal government activity, maybe. Which would be a game changer, right? I mean, that'd be pretty.
Blue Ridge Networks, I'm sorry.
Blue Ridge Networks.
So they're actually, and they do a lot of military spec stuff, but they give you, I'm sorry to interrupt. they basically like have a USB drive that people boot off into a secure network, and they use that. In fact,
Interesting.
there's companies like that now that offer that type of solutions. I'm sorry.
So to circle back on the privacy part, I think that's pretty interesting. So I do have a law firm that specializes in data privacy and cybersecurity surrounding data privacy. She's coming on the 27th, so not next week, but the week after. So that'll give her 2 weeks to kind of dissect this a little bit. And I think what I'm going to try to have her do when we're talking about, because for those that were in our peer call 2 weeks ago when she was on, we recognized that there was a lot more for us to talk about around data privacy. So I think what we were going to do data privacy and cybersecurity part 2. So I may actually have our shift the focus and talk a little bit about this particular executive order in regards to privacy, because let's just see, privacy, privacy. It's only mentioned 6 times in this entire document, right?
And that's more about retained in a matter of consistent with applicable.
That's retention.
retention.
Oh, that's not even in the document. So
Oh,
that's in the footer. While protecting privacy and civil liberties,
yeah. So that's the OCR.
right? But it doesn't talk a lot about dealing with privacy and civil liberties. The same stupid sentence. Consistent with privacy
It
laws.
goes back to FBI and their private files laws. They don't want to. Especially as the
this, wow. All right. This is really interesting. So the very first sentence talks about protecting people's security and privacy. And if you look at the rest of the document, it doesn't talk about privacy at all. I mean, there's like 3 more bullets that are exactly the same sentence in each time, but it doesn't really talk about privacy. It just says where applicable law or whatever. So it's
that first sentence, and most people fall asleep after they read that. They say the government's doing something to protect my data, but the rest of the document, they don't say anything about it.
Nope.
People jump on their soapboxes and says Biden support. I'm not trying to political. The president is protecting my data.
People's security and privacy, and must improve the government must stick their nose in it to try to identify, deter, or protect.
Yeah, so Biden said it today. He had a brief update on the pipeline thing, and he targeted the aspect of these private companies have a responsibility, and we can't make them do anything, kind of thing, right? I dropped an article in the chat session. It's not the one that actually came from that Congress interview, but it is written by Glenn Gerstle. It's just something I found real quick. Was served as the general counsel of the National Security Agency, and he has an extensive opinion piece about this whole privacy public aspect of how do we get better inside the country when we're limiting our best, right? And he has some bulleted points right at the end, and it was written on April 19th. So it seems timely to all of this.
Yeah.
Like there's a movement going on, that this happens, right? When they rolled out CMMC, you had a lot of media interviews and articles from the Govy side talking about concerns and problems, and so they're shelling the beach, it looks like.
So here's my problem with this, and the same thing with Intel, right? We spent a lot of money trying to protect our sources and methods and our process of gathering intel for the president and the president's daily brief and for Congress and stuff. And then you get one little person that just exposes it on the internet, same thing with all this stuff. We could do all this, but it really gets down to that one person that clicks on that email and they put the virus inside the network,
So this is interesting. Housing a legal authority in the FBI rather than the NSA.
Yes, because the NSA cannot
They can't look
inside the United States.
Right.
The FBI has purview in the United States.
Right. What about Homeland?
That's kind of gray, but CIA and NSA are all.
The FBI has a cybersecurity division already, just so you know. I actually met the director at one point.
But this is a legal authority.
The FBI is, DOJ. So Hmm.
And
Interesting.
this is probably where they can shut people down. The legal authority to do stuff like that, not
Right.
the countries with violent clauses such as you will all place the domestic cyber monitoring authorities within the foreign signals intelligence, the new
Homeland
legal authority
Security.
in the net. But then it says located in the new legal authority in the NSA would follow that power. So it
Then
says
home,
FBI and it says NSA. The NSA would follow.
Homeland
The new legal
Security
authority in the
Assistant.
NSA would follow that pattern.
Right. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, this is not proofed yet.
No,
No,
it's
this is his
proof.
suggestions. This is ideas of what.
Yeah, it's proof of concept. So I just want to be cognizant. It is 8 minutes of 4. I have another meeting at 4. And if I don't end this one in time, Paul's going to kill me because we're meeting at 4. So I just want to take a second here on Clubhouse and pop in. I see we have, 5 or 6 people over there. I appreciate you guys joining and listening in. I didn't see any of you. Oh, let's see if I can bring somebody up on stage that had a question here. Pedro's up on stage. So Pedro comes every week. Pedro is our Venezuelan friend, right?
The Venezuelan connection.
Exactly. Working down in Miami. So, but
and I'm focused on the cybersecurity side of things, mostly because of what I explained to you, that working with the United States in the Venezuelan territory in the near future.
Can you guys hear him okay? Somebody raise your hand if you can hear him. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Hey, my friend. No, just really quickly. I believe my question was answered at some point, but if you can touch again on it super fast for the small business like myself, I am looking towards investing my time, my efforts into cybersecurity, into the CMMC, and now with this new executive order for the small guy. What's the importance of this in a sentence, and what's the next step for us, for the guys in here in the room that we're pretty new to the government contract and cybersecurity defense side of things?
So 2 great questions. What's the importance and what should we be doing? So I would say, and you've heard me say it, and I'm going to keep saying it until it actually comes out, that legislation is coming. What that looks like, how that rolls downhill eventually, I have no idea. But I think, stuff like this executive order and stuff, it's coming. How long that will take and how much that trickles down to the MSP and trickles down to the mom and pop shop at home, I have no idea. However, what should we be doing as managed service providers? I think the first thing that we need to be doing is getting our own house in order. How do we get our own house in order? We look at things like MSP Overwatch, MSP Alliance, getting SOC 2, work the CMMC level 3 on yourself first. Hey, it's good practice, right? Work a HIPAA audit on yourself first. Hey, it's good practice, right? Work through a SOC 2 on your own. There's plenty of templates out in the world. And if you don't have one, go to thecompliancyguys.com, click on the Join Now button, and I'll walk you through all this stuff. Okay, shameless plug done. But no, in all seriously, we as industry professionals, and we as, service providers, we're in the service business. And if we don't have our house in order and pardon my French, our shit together, we shouldn't be in this business, period, right? I think somebody posted it. I don't think it was Tom. He's not here, but Tom posted on his Facebook page earlier, this is going to separate the wheat from the chaff. And as he put it, get rid of the trunk slammers, right? And how do you not become one of those trunk slammers? Start by getting your own crap together, right? Start by do audits on yourself. Then bring in an organization like Ray with Paul, and have Ray and Associates walk you through a SOC, walk you through another assessment, whatever, and partner with the right people. I think getting your house in order only A, sets you apart from everybody else, and B, puts you in a position to better protect yourself and better protect your clients.
Hey, Tim, Dr. Chase Cunningham joined us. Actually, he's wrote a lot of frameworks for the government.
Oh, good.
Popped in.
Yeah,
Chase, you
hi.
there?
Sorry I was late.
Oh, hey, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Hey, so Paul, I'm going to chit chat with them for a little bit. I'll be a little late
I
to our 4
apologize.
o'clock meeting, so I'm going to keep this going a little bit longer. So, Paul, if I'm not here or there, you can catch me up later.
So, hey, Chase, let's talk about this new federal executive order from the White House, right? I'm sure you read it.
Yep, I read it. Yep.
Did you help write it?
Did you write it?
I didn't help write it, but I had a few calls about it. So yeah.
You know who wrote it?
Yeah.
It definitely looks like a lot of cut and paste stuff here, Chase.
Yeah, they pulled a lot from a whole lot of different docs. I mean, they slapped a bunch of it together. So
What was their overall intent for what are they really wanting to achieve first, do you think?
well, I mean, I think really the crux of it was basically to say, this is a wake up moment, and they finally are kind of trying to put things together as far as like it's no longer tolerable for them to just continue to accept failure. Like that's kind of if you took everything else away, that's where this is going. You also saw Congress with their stuff about drafting negligence in cyber, which I helped author that. So I mean, all that stuff is starting to pile together.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm curious because I get a lot of calls about CMMC. It seemed conspicuously absent. Was there an evil intent behind that, or just wasn't ready for prime time, or was it even thought about?
Well, it was discussed. I know on the calls that I was on, it was discussed, but it was also one of those things of, please, Jesus, don't throw another compliance requirement into this document.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Valid.
Well, we had a lot of different conversations around. There is explicit no mention of CMMC anywhere in here, but there is mention of NIST.
Yeah.
And FedRAMP.
Right.
But so FedRAMP, if you had to think about a compliance framework or getting an ATO, FedRAMP's in there. Well, NIST is an organization, but not necessarily as a framework.
Well, they kind of loosely referenced 800-207, which is the government NIST for ZT, which okay, fair, but I think where they were hesitant is CMMC kind of seems like it's aimed almost specifically at small and mid-sized businesses, and they didn't want to freak any of them out any more than they already are.
And that's a good call. That's a good call, because I can tell you that there are enough of them already freaked out.
Yeah, I mean, that was my point to them, was don't, basically throw this at the big folks and let's start at the top and work our way down and lead from the front, rather than going, everybody everywhere all the time right now today. That's just not going to scale.
Hey, Chase Stuffy. So there's a lot of, they will establish, they have 30 days, they have 9 days. When do you think realistically we might see something actionable hit the floor?
I've heard that there's stuff working its way up that's supposed to be kind of in the I guess you'd say roughly chiseling into stone in the next 60 days. So that's pretty fast. But it's also good. And part of the other thing, the other conversation that I was involved in was who's in charge? And that's the question they're trying to. I mean, that's the question they're trying to answer right now, because it was who's running this, and no one says me.
Well, it's everybody. It's everybody. It's CISA, it's FBI, it's IC, it's
right.
FAR, it's everybody.
It's a bunch of cats running around a prairie is what it is. And it's you can't, obviously we can't have Rudy Giuliani as the freaking cyber czar, but we need somebody.
Right. So you just said a key word that I picked up on, the cyber czar. Because I've been using that word for about 7 or 8 months now on some of the various posts and topics I've been talking about. And I thought I saw something, I referenced something in here that they shall appoint a person, right? So let me see if I
saw the word czar. I think it just passed it. Yeah.
Oops, that's not.
It was up where the Homeland Security stuff was.
Control F. ZAR? No, it's what am I looking for?
I believe they called it a leader.
Yeah, appoint.
A leader. Come, follow your leader. Come to your leader.
Yeah, wow.
Take me to your leader.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get out.
Search for Homeland Security, because it was right next to that.
I thought it was closer. It doesn't matter. But what I was trying to get at was somebody has to be in charge. By the way I read this is, hey, these couple of departments have to talk about and deal with this. These couple of departments have to talk about and deal with that. And, you know, at some point along the way, somebody needs to be in charge of all of this.
Yeah. I mean, that was the conversation that I was involved in, was like, okay, if you stood up 90 days from now, who's going to be your undersecretary of cyber or something like that? And it was, you know, a lot of him and hawing going on, but then it was one of these points too of, you guys, you know, no offense, but you can't pick somebody that's been in the government for the last 70 years and say you're the cyber person, because that's a bad idea.
Right. You can't have Bernie Sanders running this. He'll be dead in the year.
You got to find a chief security officer for a big company or something to come in.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, they've got some names in the hat, and I know they're talking to some big time execs. So
upon appointment of the National Cyber Director, maybe that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And the establishment of the related office within the executive office of the president.
Yep.
And that person
that's
where to the president.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, they didn't call it that, but I mean, it's essentially the Secretary of Cyber for the United States.
Right. Oh, so wait a minute. Somebody got promised something during, no, I was going to politicize this. Somebody got promised something during the election as to be the, you know, the National Cyber Director. No, just kidding. But in all honesty, it might be, you know, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they realize that that's a gap that they have. I put my input in and sort of said, like, look, this is kind of the person you should be looking for. And I know that there's a lot of other people throwing sort of guidelines around it. So we'll see who comes out on the far end.
I nominate Robert. Rob, you should take us over.
I'll do it. I've been in the White House before.
Perfect.
Chase, you're my deputy. No.
Yeah, I would be freaked out about that job. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't think they could pay me enough to take that position.
Yeah, it's more of a political assignment test, and it's just the zero trust officers in there, Chase. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that stuff you and I talk a lot about.
So Chase, I'm really interested. So, you know, Robert and I in the beginning were talking about there's a lot of general specific stuff, and then there's a lot of specific stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, zero trust. You know, they talk about software and code review, but then there's like a generic, like, oh, they shall do this, and it's generic. Like, it's just
copy and paste.
It is. It's very.
Yeah, I mean, it was half knee jerk and half thought out. So I mean, it's, you know, I think in the realm of effective cyber policy, it was a good step, but it was not necessarily a full step, if you catch my drift.
Yeah,
it's a good first step, definitely. It gets the ball rolling, and it gives some people some power to do some stuff.
I think what it really did, and I want to take the politics out of it for a minute. What I think it really did is it kind of put out there, hey, the federal government knows that this stuff is a mess, and they're kind of acknowledging that it's a mess, and they kind of know that they need to do something, but they're not exactly sure how to figure that all out. So let's take somebody at the toppest level and get him on board saying, hey, this stuff's a mess, go fix it.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, they're still in the conversation phase of like, well, you know, do we carve this up by agency and have that? And I mean, it's one of those things where you go to them and go, like, look, you folks have had this structure for the last 80 years, as long as the federal government's been around. Like, it's the same thing. It's just this is cyber. So like, do that, just make it cyber.
We had ComSec and all kinds of stuff, the same policies in place for you.
I mean, you've got secretaries and undersecretaries and directors and all that, and they all, you know, do their bureaucratic policy enforcement. Like, this is not rocket science.
Right. No, and, you know, it talks a lot about FAR, it talks a lot about NIST, and those organizations live and breathe this every day, and it's already part of their world. I think with this, I don't know, if I had to put summarize this in a couple of words, like, this is the president putting a stamp of approval on, hey, get your cyber shit together.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of good because in their spending bill, they've already allocated funds for cyber. I mean, it's not nearly enough, but it was enough to kind of go, okay, we've got dollars allocated. We've got this kind of generic paintbrush policy-ish thing. Now we need someone to be the sacrificial lamb to take the job.
Right. Yeah, and this is like the only mention of cost.
Yeah, but there's no penalties or ramifications in this thing either. I didn't.
Well, and that,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was the draft legislation that I worked on and sent up to them that was mentioned a couple of weeks ago, was basically there are ways to put in punitive measures into this space, and we should, because you saw that thing about the NTSB, like it's really the same thing as there's a clear definition of negligence, and if you are negligent, you should be punished.
Yeah.
I can't even find the word negligence. NEG negligence? No, I don't find that anywhere in here. But
Penalty?
No, it's not in there. It's in a different document that was drafted up, and there was some congressional conversations going around about it a week or so ago.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next, couple of weeks, the next 90 days, 120 days, next year or so. I'd love to figure out how to get on one of these boards. That would be fun. Just to be a fly on the wall and kind of have an idea of where we're going.
I would say, I mean, it's going to be a lot in line with 800-207, just at the grand level. And I mean, the people that they're looking at for the role are all strategy folks, which is good. But they're looking for someone that's heavy on strategy and experience in the government, but also understands technology enough to where they can, have the credibility of not just looking like an idiot talking about cyber.
Oh, that's Trevor then. I nominate Trevor for that role.
I think the biggest role they're going to have is find cybersecurity experts to help work on this, because as you know, in our area, AWS and a lot of these big wigs, they're picking up all the big, good cybersecurity people, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
They're going to have to find good cybersecurity people and policy writers that can get a clearance, willing to work, and can work for less money.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And pay them accordingly.
Yeah. And what you'll end up with just a bunch of people that can get a clearance that can show up and sit at a desk, and then
Right.
you get one person like Chase doing all the work.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
sign a contract.
shit. I was like, well, if we're gonna start punishing people for being idiots, sign me up for that, because I'd love to do that.
He's a former Marine, by the way, or Navy, right? Navy.
Navy, yeah, Navy. Yeah.
He drove the
Thank-
boats.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yes,
That
thank
was
you.
the best job I ever had.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I was in the Army for 13 years myself. I wouldn't say it was. I would say the first probably 8 years was the best job I ever had. The last 8 years, probably not so much.
Yeah. Once you make rank, it starts to suck a little bit.
Yeah. This whole idea of service providers is really like, that was where, like, because the nature of the people who are on our call right now are mostly MSPs, managed service providers. I think that would be true for those that are on Clubhouse as well. So, out of the 6, 12, 14, out of the 20 plus or so people that are on our call, I'd say 90% of them are service providers, either work with, work for, or run. And service providers was mentioned 15 times in this document.
Yeah, and that comes out of the fact that there's a lot of these fake places where they don't have the capability to do this. So the conversation tends to be like, let's stop trying to make people that don't do cyber and piss money away. Like, let's get experts to do it, because this thing works outsourced. Like, let's outsource it.
Right.
Yeah, and the government has a lot of contractors on site managing their systems, right? That covers that too.
Yeah,
because
right.
The way I took it there, it says conduct an array of day-to-day functions on federal information systems.
Right.
Yep.
So some could allude that does not, go down to the contractors that make a rivet for a tank somewhere. But
Well, in the example that I shared earlier with the actual work that I'm doing on a Department of Ed contract, I am the managed service provider for that company. That company has a contract with the federal government. That contract states they will be 853 Rev 5 for a moderate baseline system. I have to go into the government's CSAM system, log in with my GFE, my government device, provide all the system and documentation, provide the tabletop exercise. I, as the MSP, am doing that work for the contractor that has the contract with the government. I don't have a contract with the government, but I have the contract with the primary contractor.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that work for all their subs, by the way. and managing whatever subs are on that prime contract. As the MSP, I'm forcing that stuff downstream to the subs as well.
No, actually, Tim, that's kind of an interesting point you brought up, that you're logging in the government site. You're uploading.
I have a government furnished device, a GFE. I don't know if you can see it over here, but I have my own government laptop.
No, I wasn't actually going to go there. Where I was going to go is, okay, let's say you've securely uploaded it. Now it's on this government site. How often has the government been hacked now? But now we're providing detailed information about network security.
Yep.
And information into this system. What's to keep that one from getting hacked?
So they walked into the Capitol and took a laptop. Okay.
So the Department of Ed uses a platform, a software, a GRC, Governance Risk Compliance platform called CSAM. I forget what the stupid acronym means right now, but anyways, CSAM is a GRC. It's a web-based tool to manage. It's a multi-tenant, department-wide tool for managing 853 FedRAMP, managing their risk management frameworks. So I have two systems in there. One of them is both of them are GSS, or General Services System. Both of them provide two different functions for this particular contract. One of them is the company at whole, the primary contractor, and the other one is the actual contract that they're contracted with. So I got the entire entity of that organization under 853 for a moderate system. I take my government laptop, write my policies, do my stuff, procure my evidence, blah, 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 and put all that information into CSAM, all the supporting evidence, all the POAMs, all the SSPs, blah, 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 for both systems, for the primary system and the actual individual project as well. Which, by the way, all that goes away because we're moving to FedRAMP in September. So
as long as you get your check case. Okay.
So I've been doing that work. It used to be OVMS years ago, used to be this, used to be that, right? We've been doing this since 2002, 853 Rev 2, Rev 3, Rev 2. I don't remember at this point, but we've been doing this day in and day out through their system. So what you make a pretty good point, Brian, about what happens if that system gets hacked, because I am putting in, short of passwords, we store passwords in a vault, blah, blah, blah. But everything that is in CSAM, they can rip out and completely reconstitute that business and that project if we were to all disappear tomorrow. I mean, that's the whole point of, and at the end of the day, that's the whole point of all this crap is, and I hate to bring it up, but go all the way back to 9/11. Right? When half a city got wiped out and nobody had, DR plans, and, businesses literally disappeared. Critical businesses literally disappeared.
With that said, EMC actually had data centers in there and they just flipped over. They let them lose a bit.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, not every business works that way. Yeah. So but I mean, that's the point. Like,
yeah. Yep. And it's going to take, everybody assumes that nothing's going to happen to them. It's not going to happen to them. But going back, as we know, when crypto days, all of us that work with cryptos, that if somebody has access to the key long enough, they can figure it out. And that's why we change the key every day, right? Or more often. So the point is, if a bad actor gets access to one of these systems, all it is time. After time, and Chase, I'm sure you would agree with this, over time, you can get into it. You'll figure out how to get into it. So no system is ever safe.
Agreed. Yeah.
This is true. This is true. So I'm going to check in real quick here with the people on Clubhouse. I don't want my 4 o'clock actually got pushed till 6 o'clock, so I'm good. We can keep going as long as we want, but let me just check in here with Clubhouse real quick because we are simulcast over there. Dylan, Pedro, Kevin, Robert, any of you individuals on Clubhouse want to come up on stage? You have any questions, or we're just going to keep going?
Keep going, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, no, I am, this is very intriguing, this new talk about this topics, but I may have missed it. I'm also working right now, doing some monitoring SOC alerts, but I was wondering, have you guys talked about the current situation with the pipeline yet?
So we haven't gone down. So we started the initial conversation around the new executive order that came out last night about cybersecurity. We haven't explicitly talked about the Colonial Pipeline incident. I just wonder, Chase, maybe you have a little more insider information. I wonder the timing of this executive order around the things that have literally been happening in the last week, 3 weeks, month, or whether or not this has been going on for this EO has been kind of lingering, and then whether or not the Colonial thing just kind of pushed it over the edge.
Yeah, well, the EO's been bouncing around for a while, along with a few other things that have been working their way up the food chain. This was basically the gas on the fire that really happened to throw it in the next phase. But on top of that, the pipeline has drawn attention to the fact that there's more stuff likely coming behind this, and I don't mean that in a good way. And I mean that was a lot of the wargaming I was involved in earlier part of the week, and on Sunday was where does this pop up next? So it's getting eyeballs on glass, which is good, but the pipeline is really just kind of proving the point that all us cyber nerds weren't just Chicken Little, we were for real.
Right. Well, I mean, you back up, right? Stuxnet. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. Back up, 2003, 4, 5, Stuxnet and the ICS systems, and we've been saying this for 15 years. I don't know. I agree with the Chicken Little part. I think we've been looked at that way, which is sort of unfortunate. And I also feel my God, I don't even want to say it. The pipeline thing, and as troublesome as that was, back up 2 months. What about the Florida water supply? Right?
Yeah, right.
Hey, Chase, I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you got to go soon, but I really appreciate you coming in. And I also want to pitch his book. He has a book out.
Yeah. Put it in chat. Put the Amazon link.
I'll get the Amazon link to it.
Put the Amazon link in chat. Chase, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to have you come in, chit chat with us some other time. I know your time is valuable and I appreciate it. You can email me, tim@vitaltechservices.com, or, we can get in contact with Robert or whatever. Love to have you in. We host these calls every Thursday at 3 o'clock or 3:15 every week. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
I appreciate y'all. Appreciate you letting me jump in, and Robert knows how to get a hold of me. So I mean, if I can help out or be of assistance, look me up, and glad to connect. And thank you guys for taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time and opportunity.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
All right, so again, 420, 419. Let me just pop over to Clubhouse. I don't see anybody raising their hand wanting to come up, so we're good there. Hey, Robert, thanks for bringing him in. That was really cool.
No problem. Actually, I met him through his book, and I actually met him at the Threat Walker event, a Zero Trust event in Florida. He's actually we're neighbors, literally.
Nice. Well, so, excuse me. For those of you left on Zoom here, looks like an interesting book. Go ahead, click on it, buy his book, give him a couple kudos, whatever. So I want to wind this down a little bit. It has been a little over an hour now. Just going to pop over to Clubhouse. I'm going to do a little housekeeping while I'm doing a couple seconds of housekeeping. If you guys have any questions, pop them in chat. Hey, Clubhouse folks, how are you today? Thank you for joining. On this week's episode of The Compliancy Guys, we've been talking about the new White House executive order on cybersecurity. We also were simulcasting this on Zoom as well to our peer group. Our peer group meets every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. well, 3:15 for the next couple of weeks because I have a standing other meeting. But roughly 3 o'clock every Thursday, our paid membership offers not just the weekly peer call, but an online private forum on our website outside of, big Facebook blocking, Zuckerberg, blah, 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 blah. We offer a private Slack channel where we can all chit chat amongst ourselves, cybersecurity during the week. We offer hundreds and hundreds of downloadable resources specific to CMMC, specific to NIST, specific to a bunch of different risk management frameworks. We are also in the process of partnering with a couple of different vendors to provide tools and technologies and services at discounted rates for our members on the paid on our paid platform. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thecompliancyguys. You can find us at thecompliancyguys.com. We would love to have you join. There is a free membership, but it doesn't really give you much more than just access to our Facebook and access to a couple of things. I've been doing this kind of work and helping managed service providers understand the complexity of compliancy for several years. And I've been doing it for free out of the kindness of my heart. And I've realized I've been losing a day or two a week in doing that. So I kind of spun this all up as a way to just kind of cover my time. I mean, obviously we all need to get paid and time is valuable. So it's not like I'm asking for $1 million, but I'm asking for a few to keep me going. Websites, time, all that stuff costs money. So anyways, shameless plug is done. We thank you for joining. If anybody has any questions that wants to come up on stage, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll bring you on up. And while we're doing that, I'm going to pop over back to here and look at chat on Zoom. And yeah, let's see. So anybody on Clubhouse want to come up on stage? Yes, no, maybe so. Going once, going twice.
Thank you so much for all the information today, as usual.
Pedro, good to see you, or good to hear from you again as well. So Pedro, we need to get you in our program so that we can actually see you on screen at some point.
Yes, sir. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So Doug just posed a question here. Is there an opportunity for? Well, you know what, Doug? Why don't you just come off mute here? And I'm not going to read your thing. Just come off mute and tell us your thoughts. What are you thinking? Expand.
Hey, I'm Doug. Just wanted to ask a question. I'm a sort of new at the MSP world. I started kind of small and, I've been floating around a little bit, do other stuff for the ISP and some other things. But one of the things I was thinking about ever since I got in this group was whether or not just being specialized in NIST, CMMC, compliance, and whether or not, because obviously a lot of levels to it, you have to really have your own house in order to have that from day one. Whereas like you have one computer in an office, it's a lot easier than having 10 people working for you and then starting for the compliance. And that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, obviously, it's a lot easier to start off, as a 1 or 2 or 3 man woman or person, human. I hate trying to figure out the right pronoun. I'm sorry. As a smaller provider with, less individuals, it's a little easier. But here's the thing. Like, whether you have 1 person in 1 device or 10 people in 10 devices, the controls are still going to apply across all of them. It's just a matter of how you're doing that. So let's just say, for example, there's a vulnerability scanning control, right? Most frameworks have them. Fine. So are you scanning just 1 device or are you scanning 1,000 devices? Obviously, there's an economy of scale and a price for that along the way. But whether you're scanning 1 or 100, like, you still got to scan it. You still got to come up with a vulnerability management plan, an incident response plan, an acceptable use plan, right? So, yeah, the answer is just start, pick something and go, right? I've been saying this for months now. Start somewhere. And if you don't know where to start, reach out to me at the Compliancy Guys and I can help you get going. And I can point you to the right people and the right partners to actually get some certifications and some badge of honors under your belt.
Yeah, I agree. I would not try to take the whole elephant in one bite. Just start with simple stuff. Get your password policies and your acceptable use policies, and start working towards that, because you want to be able to brag to your clients that you are secure, right? And compliance is not security, but you want to be able to say, because where it's BA, where it's HIPAA or NIST or something, a lot of the stuff is kind of the core foundations, right? So just start every day working on your compliancy, locking down your system, protecting your passwords, protecting your system, your access and stuff, and you'll get there.
Yep. And if, like I said, if you want help trying to figure that out, you can shoot me a message. I can give you a, half hour here or there, whatever. Well, I can sort of start walking you down a path. Like, my goal with all of this stuff is to take this 20 plus years of knowledge and dump it on all of you guys and gals and people and cows and horses and whatever, and get it out of my brain and get it into your brain, so it makes my job easier in the long run. Right? There's power in knowledge and sharing that knowledge. And oh, by the way, I probably should get paid a little bit for it, right? Brian, you've been here as part of the paid program the longest. Robert, you've been around as well. Your thoughts on whether it's of value or not?
I would say for me, it's definitely been a huge help. I mean, I probably started looking at this stuff end of February, beginning of March. Started looking around, and it's so freaking overwhelming. I have 3 clients that are going to be going through the 800 171, and I kept looking at it going, I'm going to wind up being the person that's going to get the short shaft here. I'm going to have to provide all this and not get paid for it, or get paid minimally. So I started reapproaching it saying, let me learn the rest of this, go get everything in place, have the documents in place, get paid for it, and then finding out more about how to get through the certification process. And Tim's been invaluable in that. Just, I'm going to just say it, he's been my NIST for dummies. I'm like, I don't understand this. I don't even know where to begin. I need an edge, someplace to just get my hand on it so I could start getting my head around it. And, I'd say it's been invaluable for me to, sit and chat and bounce ideas, and, we'll talk on the side. We have some other ideas we're working on. Being that he comes from an MSP, he understands, our concerns. We don't want to come out of the other side of an audit and look stupid. Let's face it. In my particular case, I deal with small and medium business, so they don't always have the budgets for this stuff. And, they're constantly handicapping you and tying an arm behind your back, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to do the best I can with the budget I have, and repurposing equipment, and no, you can't have a server 2003 on there anymore, and here's why. Now I have the answer for you. Stop doing this.
Right.
And I've actually started poking at that, and a couple of them are crying a little bit, and I'm like, tough. This is the way it's going to be. This is what you need to do to keep doing your contracts. But it's that information that he started handing off to me and making me feel more authoritative about what I'm talking about. That's helping me go to them and start chipping away at them. And, I think it's one of those things, if you wait to the last minute and say, hey, I've learned all this stuff, we need to do all this, and you haven't started preparing them. And that's kind of one of the other angles I've been talking to Tim about, how to soften this up for them ahead of time. So when you get there, or maybe there's small stuff you can be picking off along the way, that wouldn't be so bad. Say, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Get them thinking about it, and getting them, especially management, to buy in it early seems to be the biggest key. So I'm sorry, I'll turn it back over.
No, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. Yeah, I blush. So, but thank you. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're kind of all in the same boat. There's a bunch of crap in technology that I know nothing about, that I lean on you people for, the rest of you all for, like, hey, tell me about the whatever. And so I think that the ability to share the knowledge is really where my heart is at, and where I'm coming from. But I do have to kind of cover my costs from time to time. So, you know, if I'm losing 2 days a week, that's 2 days a week. I'm not building my MSP or trying to put food on my table. So yeah, anyways, all right, enough of that. So thanks, Brian, for the kind words. And I'll end with the last question from Alan here. Alan, do you want to come on, or do you want me to just read it for you? Alan?
Was that one for me?
Yeah, you put
I was just going to comment that the compliance, if you're a solo MSP, if you're a solo guy acting as an MSP, just getting started, doing too much, don't try to do too much with compliance by yourself.
Yeah.
You need to work with someone else, because there's a lot involved there. And frankly, in a lot of cases, the customers that you can sell as a solo guy may be the same ones that when you say it's going to cost this much more to have me do everything that's needed for compliance for you, they're going to look at it and say, you know, we're pretty sure the penalties aren't there yet. Maybe we'll try and get by without that.
Right.
So
yeah, you make a good point, right? So I see a lot of managed service providers, a lot of, you know, break fix companies, little, you know, trying to mature along the path. And, you know, compliance is a freaking big deal. It's huge. It's, you know, pick a framework. Okay, NIST 171, 110 controls. Okay. Do you know what every one of those controls means? How to interpret that control, how to write an SOP around that control, how to write that SOP to the corporate culture and standards, and then how to get buy-in, and then push that all the way down to the end user? Yeah, that's a lot of work. Fortunately enough, I white label our compliance services. You know, you have a need, you have a prospect, you want to talk to a client that's asking you about HIPAA or PCI or Sarbanes-Oxley or CMMC or insert acronym framework here, and you're prospecting them, I'll jump on a half-hour call with you. I'll be your compliance expert to close that deal. You know, I don't want to do sales and marketing. I want nothing to do with that when it comes to what I'm doing with the compliancy guys. There's enough of those people in the industry for MSPs. That being said, Jennifer from MSP Sales Revolution, if you're not part of her program, you should be part of her program. It's $50 a month. Like MSP Sales Revolution, I can put it in chat. You can go get it. Anyways, she's my go-to for the sales and marketing part because I want nothing to do with it. But she's the go-to and gets this. Now, got a prospect in your pipeline, following through the funnel, calling you about some kind of compliance thing, and maybe they know enough of the buzzwords that you're a little hesitant. Yeah, book time on my calendar and let's close the deal, and I'll be your guy. And I say there's me and 7 other people. It's not just Tim, it's me and 7 other people. There's 8 of us in this space. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but he's coming in on the tail end. So yeah, all righty, enough shameless plugs. All righty, so I'm gonna wrap up unless somebody has, you know, and who was it that just joined? Was it Garrett that just joined? Garrett, thanks for joining us. You're coming in on the tail end here. The good news is that there'll be a recording available. If you go ahead and pop your email address, or for those of you in here, pop your email address in chat. I will get you an email and post it on our YouTube channel and on our, probably on our Facebook page as well. I'll figure it out. But you know, if you give me your contact info, and for those of you on Clubhouse, go to thecompliancyguys.com, click on contact us, and shoot me an email, and I can get you the recording as well. And you know, follow us on Facebook, follow us on here, follow us all over the place, whatever, all that shameless plug stuff. You know, at the end of the day, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys all coming out, and yeah, like us on Facebook. I don't know what else I'm supposed to say. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. So